impressive career. You were raised in the village of Pettigo, County Donegal. Then you became a Shakespearean actor, a television journalist, the originator and producer of the globally acclaimed Riverdance, and now the chair of RTE. How was being raised in Donegal informed and inspired your life and your career?
Well, Pettigo is a border town, and my parents ended up there because there weren't many teaching jobs in Donegal at the time. So we were all very young, and in fact, I left there for Dublin, for the big lights of Dublin when I was 7. So the connection goes back again because they were school teachers and had long summers off to Dunlow, to the Rosses. My father was Gweedore originally, my mother Dunlow. So my memories really reach to places like Mahery and Marramwhelan and Critch and Cloughlass and the main street in Dunlow, where both my parents had pubs opposite each other, their families. But I mean, obviously the Donegal blood that runs in your veins has an enormous impact on I think the nature and character of those who are bred out of that era, particularly. I mean, I was born in the late 50s. So, I mean, the influence of that and the poverty and the hard work and the emigration, both my grandparents, my father was born in New York. His parents came back during the Great Depression. My mother's father was born in New York. So at a very early age, we knew about the value of place, the sense of place, the work ethic, and also the sense of a bigger world out there that we had to look to provide what the community couldn't provide at the time.
It's extremely, a time capsule of Ireland past, and in Ireland, obviously, the Donegal of your childhood has changed significantly. Improved transportation, internet infrastructure makes it possible to live in Donegal and work globally. So what else makes Donegal, particularly Donegal, the county of, a destination to start and grow your business? And I really want to know, what are the secret rhythms? Because you allude to that when just the names of the towns, it's just like mythical. So what is it about Donegal that's different from anywhere else?
Well, I mean, it is a unique brand to it. I think those who come from it, we've had an enormous number of Donegal musicians and dancers in Riverdance over the years. There is a uniqueness about the nature and character of the individual. There is a space about the county. There is, obviously, the infrastructure has improved. I would prefer to have a better transport system. I would adore a train going to Donegal, from Donegal to Derry to Belfast and down to Dublin. Those things we should all look for in the future, because there is, to a certain extent, where Donegal is positioned, it has looked to the north and it has looked to Scotland. And but I now see post-COVID an enormous number of people setting up. I see small rural developments, the stones that were built centuries ago now being used again to rebuild homes for people who will work remotely. So I think that community is a huge part of what Donegal offers. And I think that what I would like to see there is, rather than the large companies go in and pull from communities, I would like to see people go in and work with communities, because there's a huge richness of the community there, both in learning of language, both in tone, in concept. I think it's a tremendous place for anyone in ecotourism, tourism, fisheries, IT, creativity, textiles. There's such a richness there yet to be tapped. And I really believe that those within Donegal will warm to it, will grow with it, and will never lose the essence of what that county is.
Well, that's an incredible journey. We're coming from your childhood to this current day, but there's still, as you say, is transportation and air link and train links. But what you're kind of describing, I think, is that sort of circular economy or that donut, the sustainability where you're around a local area and everything feeds in instead of going to the marketplace in Dublin or Belfast. And more communities, obviously, as we go out of the pandemic, are looking to have that circular economy and obviously provided by business and infrastructure. What would be your message, obviously, to the global Irish business diaspora who are looking to support and foster not only the upcoming of Donegal, but business opportunities, and most particularly coming from the Awaken Hub, female entrepreneurship, coming from the really granular level to have an opportunity to flourish in Donegal?
Well, I think, I mean, I'll focus a little just on the creative economy maybe for a moment, because it's an area I'm most familiar with. And I think that we have to kind of stop using concepts such as hope and imagination or creativity as abstract ideas. I think we have to start using them as strategies to build policy upon. And I think that if we look at two things that have happened post-COVID, which I think are critical for the growth of the creative industries in a county like Donegal, is one, we've had Minister Hargey in Belfast set up an employability scheme for 70 people within artistic communities. And we also have in the South, Minister Catherine Martin set about the artist remuneration scheme, which will allow artists to survive and thrive in areas. It'll allow all those people who want to go to Donegal or who want to develop textiles or want to develop art, creativity, video gaming, whatever it is, it will allow them to be where they want to be and to also create and develop and build a force. I'm certainly I'm very anti the old Thatcherite way of thinking there is no such thing as community. I believe community is everywhere. I wouldn't like to see large companies go in and suck everything out. I believe capitalism hasn't worked. And I think nobody's prepared to accept that capitalism hasn't worked. And I think there's a much better way now through cooperative movements, through small scale, sustainability, local, with a great identity and a great unique selling point. And I think Donegal offers that in spades.
Well, I would agree with you, because as we've seen with the COVID, the great resignation, or trying to get your Gen Z employees back into the office, they're going to be voting for quality of life over working 60-hour days. So the tide has shifted, and it seems like Donegal is positioned to be able to capitalize on that because of the quality of life and the richness of the culture. But I would like to go and ask you personally, how has being an actor, a Shakespearean actor, award-winning one, and a producer of the performing arts supported, informed, and gave you a critical advantage in your business pursuits?
From the moment I stood up on a desk when I was about 8 years of old and recited The Fiddler of Dooney, because I had a wonderful primary school teacher who had a much greater interest in theatre and drama than in maths and science at the time, even though she was wonderful at all of that, I knew there was something in the language of that W.B. Yeats poem. There was something in the rhythm and the sound of it that just, there was something in how it flowed through my veins, my heart and my head that made me, there was a moment. And I was young, I was about 8 or 9, where I thought, this is the world for me. Whatever world that is, this is the world for me. I knew nothing about that world. And actually I stumbled into it because I come from a generation where we did stumble. And where actually we stumbled into opportunity as well as out of opportunity, because it wasn't as structured, it wasn't as focused on an educational path, even though my parents were very focused on it. young women like me at the time were expected to be was teachers or nurses or, you know, civil servants. And it's very different now for young women. And that's why it is absolutely wonderful to see. I mean, I met a young woman last week who lives in the Burren in County Clare, who on her own has 101,000 Instagram followers and is selling thousands a week on Etsy of her work based on the Burren and the ecology of the Burren. I take that model and I put that model up in Donegal, up in Glenveigh, up in Inishowen, and anywhere. So for me, I had a joyous career. I came at a time where you could go into RT and be promoted. I went into RT because I wanted to act. I wanted to be in the RT Players. I never made it, but hey, I did other things instead. So, and then along came opportunity, and Riverdance was an enormous opportunity, and I was ready. And actually the zeitgeist was ready at the time. We were just at that moment that we wanted all of us to portray Ireland in a new way. We wanted to come out of the back room into centre stage. There was a need to modernise how Ireland was viewed, and the sort of cloth caps and the toothless owl fellas with pints of Guinness. I love those images still. I adore to see them. But I wanted to say, hey, there's another side to this fantastic country as well. So I learned as I went along. I got my working degree in accountancy and in law as I went along, because I just held on to the essence of what was happening and understood, I suppose, through the work ethic of Donegal, the power of negotiation, the power of treating people well, the power of caring about what you have, and the power of pride in what you have. And I suppose all of that in some way shaped me. There is no better world to exist in than the creative world for me. And in fact, most entrepreneurs are creative in all of their way, irrespective of whether they're in science or in technology. They're fundamentally creative because they have a vision that drives them. And yes, I cannot wait to see the next generation of young women pioneer new ideas. And I'm waiting for some young woman to come up with the next Riverdance, actually.
That's absolutely my next question, because there is moments in time that stop the show. And this is a moment in time in 1994 on a global stage where 6 minutes and 40 seconds literally seized the heart and mind and soul of global audiences. Thinking back, not logical, thinking back as we've been talking about rhythm and spirit and language and flow, what was some of the inspiration or the clues or the dream that you had to put something together and to call it Riverdance? I mean, just take us back. I mean, obviously it was a hard process. What was the spark that propelled you on?
There were a number of things that coalesced, and timing, as your other guests will well know in the creative industry and in any industry, is everything. You can have a fantastic product and it can land at the wrong time. Just everything worked. It was the perfect stage. We'd had a number of Eurovisions. The last one prior to the Riverdance Eurovision had been in Mill Street and had very much a rural Cork feel. When I was asked to produce it, I thought, okay, my focus here is on representing the next generation of Irish, young, modern, through set design, through lighting, through the interval act, through the presentation. I had no control over the 29 songs, but I was able technologically to introduce for the first time in-vision voting. So, I mean, and we had a war in Bosnia-Herzegovina at the time. So it was extraordinary sort of meeting of all of that. I had seen separately Michael Flatley dance separately and Jean Butler at a small event in the National Concert Hall. I was in the audience. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I'd love to do a documentary on the American influences of the diasporic influence on Irish dance. So I started progressing that. And next thing I got the call for the Eurovision. And I thought, okay, I know. We had it based in the Point, the old Point, now the free arena. And it was on the River Liffey. So I used the River Liffey as the theme for the entire production. We had an electronic river running through the show. So Bill Whelan had 10 years earlier done with Paddy Maloney and the Chieftains a piece called Time Dance for the Eurovision. So it was absolutely spot on that this would be Riverdance.
So River Run through Adam and Eve, I mean, going to the continuation of Anna Olivia. So wonderful. I mean, you just encapsulated how the fusion of art and the fusion of that collaborative process and showing up, just to show up and see two separate dancers and fuse them together and make an amazing business opportunity out of it. I think that that is something we would love to let the women out there. Don't hide your artistic background or your artistic pursuit. And I'd like to have one last question, which we think at AwakenHub is critically important. It's about networking and collaboration. And I think if you, in the theater, as I used to run a theater company, I run my company now, which is a digital events agency, like I'm still running it on at Lincoln Center. How has networking and collaboration informed your decisions and your work?
Well, I mean, networking for Riverdance was absolutely everything. And also relationships, building good relationships with a global community. And that is hugely important. And that's what we have done. Many of those who promote Riverdance now promoted it 25 years ago. We have very solid relationships with our North American promoter, our Irish promoter, our German promoter, our Australian promoter. All of that was networking. It is so important because actually we helping each other out. I never mind getting a phone call to say, hey, do you know anybody in this field who might be helpful here? And those are the things we keep open. Now, I'm not a social media chick, unfortunately. I'm getting into, you know, the third phase of my life, but I admire those who use it to their advantage, and it can be used. And I think in a way, don't forget about those of us who have been around for a long time and hopefully will be around for longer, because there's much to learn. I always felt that when I was in RTE as a young fledgling producer. They tended to throw out the experienced ones. So when I looked for some help, there wasn't anyone to give me help. It's really wonderful to get the richness of experience as well.